Franchising is the most misunderstood and most overlooked form of entrepreneurship. We're here to educate you and help you find the entrepreneur within. Franchising is not all about the French fries.
We find that individuals who are exploring business ownership tend to have a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about the franchise industry. So what we want to do is help prospective business owners make confident and educated decisions before moving forward or not moving forward with a business. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Hi, welcome to episode 87 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. I'm Roxanne Rapske, and this is my colleague, Sara Waskow. We created this podcast to bring you education and information about business ownership and all things franchising. Our guest for this episode is Gary Prenevost. He is a colleague of ours in FranNet up in Canada. He's a multi-unit franchisee with FranNet. He's been with FranNet. It'll be 24 years in June, and he's also the author of the Unstoppable Franchisee. So welcome, Gary. Thank you for joining us today to tell your story.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
We are excited to have you. We are so impressed that you wrote the book, but first of all, your background and kind of how you began in entrepreneurship is kind of a fun story. You have a lot of interesting jobs and kind of entrepreneurial experience, which kind of led you where you are today. So just kind of start with your entrepreneurship aspirations when you were young. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think when I look all the way back, it was not a matter of aspirations. It was a matter of necessity. I was 6 years old. I got a paper route and I started delivering papers. This was for the Montreal Gazette because my brother was sick and my dad had to run somebody back and forth to the car. That ended up being me. Ended up taking over my brother's paper route. I had that for several years. We moved to Toronto when I was 10. And by age 13, I had one of Toronto Star's the third largest paper route in the entire city. So whenever other kids were out playing after school, I was delivering papers and collecting money. And back then, you're carrying a lot of money around, and it got me interested in making my own money, paying my own way, and just being self-reliant. So that was my first entrepreneurial venture, I guess.
So it started at 6 years old, correct? Out of necessity. Mm-hmm. And then you said at 10 is when you had
we moved, yeah.
You moved, okay. And you had the third largest paper route. Is that what you said at 10 years old?
Yeah. No, from 10, I just got a route, and then I just kept on finding more subscribers and knocking on doors, and you need a paper, and that's just, all the way back when.
That's awesome.
And you said you grew up, how many, is it 5 children in a very competitive family, and you're the middle child?
5 kids in 6.5 years, 4 of them boys. It was like we competed for everything, especially food.
I can imagine.
Yeah, my husband is the oldest of 3 boys, and he eats so fast, and he said they had to. And so talk about competing for food, right? So that's funny.
We actually guard our food. Like you don't.
Too funny. So from there, the paper route, then you had a lot of different jobs, you said, in addition to doing the paper route. And you said school was kind of...
We moved to Manitoba when I was 15 years old. And so too old to deliver papers anymore, but I wanted to work. So I got a job. My first job, I think, was a gas jockey. Couldn't get a lot of hours, so I just started getting other jobs. I usually had 2 or 3 jobs that I was going to every week to get the kind of hours I want, and only ever fired by one job. I was driving a forklift too fast on a Sunday, and somebody walked in front of me. And fortunately, I didn't hit them, but I did do some damage, so that was eject. But I learned a lot through all the different things I've done. What types of work I'm good at, what I like to do. I was all around people, around helping people. And then I also learned from some great bosses how to treat people and how to work with others. And I learned from some crappy bosses how not to interact with people at work. And that just gave me a really strong foundation. One of the jobs, I was driving trucks and delivering pop and lumber and stuff like that. And we were getting paid piecework. So I was making a lot of money. but not really a future. So I was able to get a little bit more serious about my career, got a job with TD Bank, which is one of the big banks in Canada, and started in the management training stream. Never, by the way, I had a high school degree. I never got to university because I was a casual student. I was having more fun working than studying. So it was kind of cool to have that learning journey more experientially through jobs. When I got in the bank, very quickly I got serious about my career. Great organization to learn about business, about leadership and all of that, and progressed to the point of being a turnaround specialist for underperforming branches. And over the course of 7 years, I was shipped to branches that were underperforming to help them get back into the standard rating when the auditors would come in. My reward would be, here's another crappy branch, and here's another challenging branch. And finally, after a few branches, it's like I'm making a lot less than the people who I'm replacing who weren't doing the job. So I asked for a raise, and they wouldn't give it to me. So 2 weeks later, I quit and became an entrepreneur.
Wow. So that was the catalyst for you saying, I'm not going to let someone else determine my worth. I'm going to go out on my own and do it.
Yeah. And the other thing with the bank, and I think this is true with corporate Canada, I was the contortionist in the invisible box. It's like rules, structure. You got to do this. You got to wait for that. Drove me nuts.
I can see that, especially being entrepreneurial at a young age, and then all of a sudden being confined into a box. That would be challenging for anybody.
Yeah.
So how'd you get into franchising?
Well, one of our family businesses was live and artificial tropical plants, and one of our clients was a training franchise. I sold them their plants, did the install, started getting to know one of the staff. Next thing you know, fall in love, and it happened to be the owner's daughter. Oh. So, yeah, one of those stories. So they recruited me away from the family business to sell franchises. That was 1991. And in 1992, I wanted more work, and they didn't have anything for me. So I bought my first training franchise. That was my first franchise, was buying a franchise. Did that for 10 years, built that company up to one of Canada's largest training companies. We had 110 offices. And then my wife and I split up, and FranNet was one of my lead sources for prospective franchisees. So FranNet, the person who was running Canada, recruited me away from that company. And that's how I got into FranNet.
That's wonderful. I love hearing stories about how everything evolves. So you're a franchise consultant in Canada, just like we are consultants here in North Texas. Very successful, as Roxanne mentioned in the intro. You've been with us almost 24 years. What got into you to write a book?
Well, one of the things that I guess part of it is the old training roots in me. And we were business coaching, sales management, leadership. So people, human skills development. And one of the things when our clients are validating with existing franchisees with any brand, we want them to talk to top performers. We want them to talk to middle performers. And we want them to talk to unhappy performers. And I kept on seeing over and over again through all the patterns, one of the core drivers of lack of success in franchising is the franchisees don't follow the systems and the rules. They don't do some of the base work and the functional work because they don't like it. And it started bothering me. So is there a solution here? The entrepreneur in me is saying, man, maybe there's an opportunity. So I didn't know if I had a book in me or not, but I wanted to research, is this a unique problem to a few brands or is this systemic? And so I interviewed over 30 CEOs, some of the CEOs of the largest franchise systems on the planet, thousands of locations, multi-billion dollars, some fast-growing franchise system CEOs, some mid-size, private equity owned or founder owned. And the focus was, what do your top 1% to 4% franchisees do? What are their traits and characteristics that the rest don't do, the rest of the franchisees? And what do they not do? So we looked at both sides, but that wasn't enough. I talked to other industry experts. I also talked to the top 1% to 4% franchisees and asked the same similar questions. And that's how I got to the 7 drivers that are ubiquitous across the vast majority of franchise systems. And so I created exercises in the book so that people can learn along the way. And as they focus on the areas of growth, build and develop that, and then build and develop into their next level of focus. one of the things I learned along the way, the core focus is that the franchisees, their business will only grow to the degree that they grow their skills personally and grow their team skills.
So one of the things that you learned, and it's your tagline now, is that top performance in franchising only happens when you choose the right business. And you made a point that sometimes when the franchisees aren't doing what they're supposed to do, it's because they don't enjoy it. They don't want to do it. They don't like it. So that's all part of helping somebody find the right franchise, right? You have to understand what your role is in getting customers, right? Not just managing the employees. So I think there's a lot that people don't think about, especially when they get online and just start looking at franchises based on what they think they might be attracted to. So what are your biggest takeaways from the book and all the interviews that you did? How does that benefit the reader or the potential for us? Somebody's going to be looking for a franchise, right? They want to buy a franchise. So how can that book help people see their way to finding the right fit?
So there's a few different elements. Let's talk first about what most people, when they start their franchise search, whether they go to a franchise show, they go online, they look for franchise, buy a franchise, they get bombarded with information.
Yep.
What's happening to the vast majority of people is, I believe that they go into this journey, I'll know it when I see it. I'm just going to keep on looking until I know when I see it. And they've got a zone of awareness, and that's based on what they think is a good business, what their preferences are. But that zone, or that cone, if you will, might be 20 or 30 degrees when it's a 360-degree field. So they're either looking in the wrong places or a very incomplete search, or what they think is good is not a good business for them. And so they get excited by a brand because a lot of people have been successful with a brand, or it's a very profitable business. But that only happens when they run the business well. So and they make a lot of assumptions along the way. So coming back to the book, the first element, driver number one, is mindset. You have to have a growth mindset, a next level mindset, because being a business owner, it is hard work. There's a lot of things that you constantly have to evolve with the business. There's an old saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. That's a military application. Well, in business, no plan survives first contact with the market. No plan survives first contact with the customer, prospective customer. In other words, you have to adapt. So that mindset of growth, how do I continually learn from my wins? How do I learn from the mistakes and avoid them in the future? How do I learn from other franchisees who are doing well? It's being prepared for that. I think that driver one really helps people get into that right mindset level. The next driver is awareness. And there's operational awareness, there's skills awareness, there's several levels of awareness that I get into. But being in business, you have to be self-aware, but you also have to continually mine the information that the business signals are there. And this is where the key performance indicators, KPIs, the dashboard of the business. A lot of people, they buy franchises or they start businesses from scratch, or even buy existing businesses, and they're what I call financially illiterate or KPI illiterate. They don't take enough time to learn what are the signals that are real time. Our human body, we have 5 senses that keep us very informed. Well, the KPIs are the things that inform the business owner and what decisions they should make, what activities they should focus on, those different types of things. Then the remaining drivers are all about where do you improve and how do you improve depending on what the core skills are. I think Roxanne, one of the questions you asked, one of the big takeaways from my book, probably the biggest surprise from my book, was the sixth driver, which is interdependence. As long as I've been in franchising, I didn't see how important that was. A lot of people buy franchise because of the support, the systems, the training that the franchisor brings to get them launched and accelerate their learning curve and compress the time it takes and mitigate that risk. But once they've got the business, they've gone from beginner to competency. They're okay at running the business. Then year 2, they go from competency to proficiency. Now I'm really running the business well. That's when they don't use the franchisor as much, because the franchisor has done a lot of the work. But the great franchisees, those top 1%, they are constantly mining from other franchisees, and they're working strategically with the franchisor. Here's where can we take this business? How can we do things differently? Where do we optimize? And that was, wow, that's one of the greatest strengths of franchising, is more support comes from the franchise family than the franchisor, as long as the franchisor facilitates that ongoing discussion.
I love that. It's really insightful. And I always tell prospective clients or just people that I'm talking with about franchising, and I think that people tend to think about the support that the franchisor provides, but they tend to overlook the value of other franchisees in the system. And just like we're both franchisees with FranNet and can glean a lot of knowledge from each other, it should be the same in a franchise system as well, with any franchise outside of just FranNet. And I also always say there's 4,000 franchises and not all are created equal, but good franchises, you're going to find value in that communication and collaboration with those other franchisees in the system. So when you talked to, I think you said how many people did you end up talking to? I don't remember what it was. You put in 2,000 hours, and for the book you had tons of interviews.
There were 60 formal interviews, fully recorded, transcribed, and countless less formal interviews. Sometimes I'm at a conference and I sit down for half an hour with somebody, but just a ton of perspective. So I had the privilege of weaving other people's brilliance to bring these insights together.
That's what I think is so great about the book, is all the different perspectives that you have on so many different areas. And I know one thing that I've thought was really stood out to me from the book was when you interviewed top performers and what they shared about why people fail. So share with us a little bit about that.
So one of the CEOs said to me that, Gary, if all it took to create great success in franchising was follow the system, everybody would be a top performer. The difference is top performers do more with the franchise system than average performers or low performers. So this is where top performers will get to a point, you think about the growth curve. Every time there's a growth period, there's a sacrifice of effort, time, and money to get through that growth journey. When you first buy the franchise, you pay the franchise fee, you take that 9 to 12 months of getting the business to break even, and then year 2, now you take another year, and again, as I said, going from beginner to competency to proficiency. Well, a lot of people, the average performers, they get to that proficiency. Okay, now I got a good life. I can coast. I don't have to work as hard. And they just plateau, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's why some people buy franchise. But top performers, they say, okay, I'm going to coast for a while, but while I'm coasting, I'm going to reflect what worked, what do I need to do next? And they're going to set their next level goals, and they're going to define their next growth stage and what sacrifices they're going to make to get to that next level. And it's a cycle that goes on over the course of several years. So it's constantly being able to invest time, effort, focus, and money on taking the business to the next level. And that's not just what do they have to do, it's bringing the right people in. It's looking at, do they have the right markets? In some cases, I've tapped out this market, let me get a different market. Let me scale through additional units. So it's that, but it doesn't happen unless they focus on improving their skills. And that's where, going back to what we were just saying, learning from the other franchisees who are further along in their growth journey, and sharing with other franchisees as well.
So let's switch gears for a minute and talk about how many people you've personally placed or helped. I think you said you've placed over 2,000 franchisees, right?
No, I've worked with over 2,000 people. Okay. The full search journey, we're approaching over 800, around that 800 mark of people who've actually bought and proceeded.
Got it. Okay. So I'm sure not everybody has been a success story, right? So Can you tell us of the failures that your placements have had? What would you attribute that to? What are the top things you'd attribute that to?
There's a few. I remember one story. They were a senior executive in marketing, and they wanted to buy a marketing-based business that was a lot of cold calling, business to business, and the very nature of getting the business off the ground was going out and doing a lot of community engagement and prospecting through the traditional shoe leather, just meeting people and knocking on doors. And we had several calls throughout the research journey. Hey, are you ready for this? Or do you understand how much it is? 9 months in, he quit. He says, I don't like cold calling. It was only $60,000. I can walk away from that. It must be nice. But to me, they quit. They didn't fail. Yeah. That's one example. We had another, and this one was really frustrating. We had a few people who did this. They bought a multi-unit franchise model where they pay the franchise fee for each unit up front, so they protect a territory. They got the first unit open, and they, ahead of the franchisor's advice, ahead of the recommendations, they opened the second unit before the first one was profitable. So they used the capital they were going to use and dedicate initially to get that first unit to break even and a little bit ahead. And they spent it on getting the second unit open, and they didn't have enough capital to support the first unit. It failed, the second unit failed, and they lost everything. That's just, you don't want to open a second unit until the first unit is up and running and so self-sustainable. So that was another big one. And I think the third one was, I've seen over and over again, undercapitalized. It's a different scenario than the first one, the second one I just mentioned, where they didn't give themselves enough time in their forecasting to get the business up and running. They bought a business they could afford to open, but they underestimated how long it would take to also continue to inject in the business until they got enough customers. Part of that was because they didn't do the marketing strategies that the franchisor said. Franchisor said $4,000 a month in marketing. Well, I only need to spend $1,500. So if you're going to buy a franchise, do what the franchisor says for the first year without question. Even if you don't like it, even if you don't understand it, you will come to understanding sometime during that first year. That's why that is so important. Once you've got that you're at that competent phase of understanding, now you can make different decisions.
That is great advice.
Yes.
We run into that ourselves. And so thank you for sharing that. We appreciate you taking your time to share all your wisdom with us today. Is there anything else? You shared some great tips already. Is there anything else before we wrap up that if somebody's thinking about buying a franchise, that in all the conversations that you had writing the book and all the time you spent at FranNet, is there any one tip that you might give a prospective franchisee to help them potentially be more successful in business?
Yeah, it goes back to what I love to share is that high success in franchising only happens when you pick the right business. Do the self-introspection first. Do the modeling. Whether you use FranNet or another expert, very few people have bought a business before. They don't know all the different things they need to consider. We take them through 10 to 14 different criteria. We look at what is the skill set? What are the transferable skills they like to do? What is the stuff they don't like to do? And then we look at multiple businesses. So you shouldn't just look at one business. You should learn from several businesses at the same time. But it starts first with creating that internal model and the criteria. Think back to when you were dating. When we were looking for that life partner, did we not have a ideal specifications list? Must have, would be nice to have. Well, a franchise is a business marriage. You're signing on for 5-10 years or longer. So you want to make sure that the must-have criteria is there, and a lot of the would-be-nice-to-have criteria is there, and what must not be there isn't. Yeah. This is where roles like what you do and what I do, we shine the light in the dark corners of the room that the prospects aren't even thinking to look at, so that good, bad, or indifferent, they have to square off with it.
Great advice.
Yes. And Roxanne,
Excellent.
she uses the analogy of a marriage all the time. Nobody wants to get in a bad marriage. Nobody wants to get into a bad business. So we appreciate that very much. Gary, if somebody wants to buy the Unstoppable Franchisee, where would they purchase that?
Best place to go is Amazon.com or Amazon. It's Amazon. You never know what it's going to cost on Amazon. Sometimes it's $18, sometimes it's $30. So Amazon you're going to get the best deals, the best price. You can buy an ebook or the hard copy if you like hard copy.
We appreciate that. You are so valuable to FranNet and to the franchise industry. I know that a lot of people, as we talked about, participate in the book, and we're so complimentary of you and the time and energy you put into that book. For those of you joining us today, thank you so much. Again, I am Sara Waskow and my colleague Roxanne Rapske with FranNet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma. We are very active on LinkedIn, so please reach out and connect with us there. I am Sara, Sara, last name Waskow, Roxanne, last name Rapske. Please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find this podcast where Unpredicted Entrepreneur, wherever you get your podcast. Our YouTube channel is FranNet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma as well. So thanks for joining us, and we hope everybody has a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.